It's already the end of March, the end of the first quarter of 2019. That's flown by just like that. And already, so far in the year, the JSE is up nicely, despite some of its key components being battered down very hard. Companies like Tongaat, Hewlett have seen valuations diminish very substantially. Aspen Pharmacare has been hit hard. On the other side, we see Naspers do the most extraordinary deal to take its internet business outside of South Africa and put it onto the Euronext exchange in the Netherlands. So there's been a huge amount of movement in the first quarter of 2019, movement that ultimately could be good for your retirement. This is Taking Stock. I'm Bruce Whitfield, and we have with us this evening Govender and Paul Theron. Both are market experts, both are market watchers, both are paid to invest other people's money, and both real people rely on their insights on stock markets. Believe it or not. Paul Theron, Naspers, the biggest deal since buying Tencent for $32 million in the early 2000s, I think it was 2001 or so. They're now doing something very complicated, which I'm hoping you can put into small English words to explain what it is they've announced this week that could be massively beneficial for South Africans.
Yeah, I do like it, Bruce. You know, we've been saying for a while that Naspers is woefully undervalued on our local market, and that's because it has all of these internet businesses, each individually worth a lot, but when you add them together, you just don't get the price that you deserve on the local market, which is a variety of reasons for it. You know, these assets are far away, the companies are complicated, the local investors are stupid, international investors don't like investing in Africa, and that sort of thing. So effectively what the management has done is that they've said, listen, we're going to take those international assets, put them in a Dutch-listed Euronext entity. Hopefully, the big European investors will buy that thing, and as a result, our shares in Naspers will accumulate in value, will rise in value.
One of the theories goes, Govender, that if you're a big enough Euronext component, that index tracking funds are forced to buy your shares in order to be compliant with the rules that govern the passive funds around the world. I mean, if that then pushes up the price of these internet businesses on the Euronext exchange, and Naspers listed here on the JSE, which owns 75% of the Euronext business, I'm getting lost myself, suddenly the value of my retirement annuity, the value of people's pension funds, goes up.
Oh yeah, most certainly, because Naspers is like almost like a quarter of the index, a fifth to a quarter of the index at the moment. It's a huge chunk, and it's far too large for a normal, fund manager to go and say, let's have a normal neutral weight rating on Naspers, let alone an overweight rating, because you put a quarter of your investments into a single company. It's not no portfolio manager and theory would say that's a good idea. However, when they take it to Europe, it suddenly becomes the biggest internet company in the whole of Europe. It's like that just shows how bad Europe is doing, as well as how big
becomes the biggest internet company in Europe.
Yeah. It does, and it basically becomes a sector on its own almost. You got high-tech companies in Europe. You got, like Paul was saying before, SAP, and you got Naspers or Tencent or Newco, whatever you're going to call this thing. And it's going to be the reverse of what's happening in South Africa, where people in South Africa can't have as much Naspers as they should have because it's against portfolio theory. In Europe, it'll be the reverse. They must have more Naspers than they should have because they don't have exposure to this particular sector. So it's going to be, I think, also a kind of reversal and giving them true valuation. To give you an idea, Tencent's holdings, Naspers holdings in Tencent, about $130 billion.
If we put it into rand terms, the stake that Naspers owns in Tencent is worth about 1.9 trillion rand.
Yeah.
Now, all of the businesses that Naspers owns around the world, including Die Burger and Rapport and Media24 and until recently MultiChoice, plus Tencent, plus Mail.ru, plus the big food delivery business in Germany, which is going into this entity in Europe, they're worth 1.4 billion rand altogether.
Yeah.
It's completely nuts that there's this huge trap of value that's been listed on the JSE for so long, Paul.
And that's what we're going to unlock, because you're absolutely right. You shouldn't have started with the burger, because the burger, as they used to call it, is the least valuable asset in that whole portfolio.
I was making a point.
The OLX assets are worth a lot. Swiggy's worth a lot. PayU should be worth a lot. Mail.ru should be worth a lot. Delivery Hero is huge. So we're really hoping that in the fullness of time, Newco will really blossom. Look, it's a bit strange because I can't quite figure out yet what's going to happen. We, the South African shareholders, are going to get some Newco shares, plus we're going to have Naspers, which owns 75% of Newco. Maybe this is just the first step. maybe in due course they'll do some further work, or maybe they'll unbundle Newco shares to Naspers down the line.
You've also got a choice as a Naspers shareholder,
Yes.
I believe, to get some new Naspers shares because
Instead of.
because if you
Yes.
switch into Newco, you could have a capital gains event, and that becomes a taxation problem in terms
So we're
of
going to have to
capital
see how
gains.
that those options unfold. But my sense of it would be you'd want as many Newcos as possible, although that tax issue is probably alive. We should think about that.
It's an important one to consider for anybody who has got Naspers shares. And the vast majority of South Africans who've got any kind of pension fund, any kind of pension savings, will have a stake in Naspers. This matters to the vast majority of working South
Yeah, I
Africans.
must say, we at Vestact have been one of those irresponsible fund managers that's been overweight Naspers, even though it's a big part of portfolios, just because everything else has either been falling on its face or just doesn't look as attractive or reliable.
And you look like a genius because you've got it right. Had it gone wrong, and had Tencent
Well, we
fallen
looked
over, you would have
cleverer
looked
when
very
it was
silly.
at 4,000 rands a share. Then it went back down to 2.9. Then we didn't look so clever. So it's been, alternately good and bad.
Yeah, the expectation is that this could lift as much as 20%. Just the mere physical listing of these assets could actually lift the share price 20%. You don't get a complete closing of that discount. You don't get
Yeah.
the real full valuation.
Look, it hasn't moved yet. The deal's been announced.
Well, it has. It's moved down 3% on Monday and 2% on Tuesday.
But 10 cents been off, so
Yeah.
I don't know. But,
Yeah.
I mean, shouldn't it start moving? When's it going to start moving?
Yeah, it should. I mean, but the thing is as well, I mean, there's also going to be that free float coming about. So what are they going to do with that money that comes through? Because they're going to sell a quarter of the shares
Yeah.
away.
Yeah.
So that's going to be another. I mean, a quarter of the shares. If you do the numbers, that's a lot of money.
I'm not even sure they're going to sell anything, though. Aren't they just going
It's
to...
not an unbundling, it's simply a moving of assets from one legal
Yes.
entity into another legal entity, and you will then have the opportunity as an investor to buy those shares on that market, in which Naspers holds 75%. It
Yes, but
seems complicated,
They're
yet
going to
deceptively simple.
distribute a portion of Newco shares to their existing Naspers shareholders, is what I understood. I don't think they're going to be selling anything and raising any cash.
No,
I
it's
don't
not.
think.
No, they're not doing that. What the best explanation I've heard for this is somebody, people are calling it Newco, which is a dreadful name. They'll come up hopefully with something a bit more creative. Somebody described it as Discount Co. And this is the level of hype that is building up in the market. Is there any risk that we're going to be disappointed? I suppose the only thing that can disappoint investors now in Naspers is if the slowdown that Chinese investors have been worried about this week manifests and suddenly tech shares go out of favor. So often these deals are done at precisely the wrong point in the cycle. People have been talking about this for 4 or 5 years. Now the deal is done. Maybe the timing is bad. Any concerns on that point?
Look, I mean, Tencent did have a bit of. One of the reasons it fell, one of the reasons we had that fall from 4,000 to below 3,000 in Naspers was because Tencent came under pressure. And Tencent came under pressure. One of the reasons for that was because they had a tiff with the government, around the release of some important games. And, we always think of, Tencent and Baidu and Alibaba as these kind of like companies relative to like Google and whatnot. But really they're very different because they are to a certain extent controlled by the Chinese government. The Chinese government, for instance, when it comes to AI, tells each of these companies what they're going to do. You're going to do healthcare, you're going to do this, and you're going to do that. And these companies kind of follow those rules. And if there is a bit of a fallout by the Chinese government, or there is some kind of pushback from there because of something that happens, that's one of the vulnerabilities that Tencent has that some of the Western companies don't have. And that's one of the reasons that
we need to have a realistic perspective on this, because this isn't a slam dunk. This isn't a dead certainty that there is going to be a 20% increase in the value of your Naspers shareholding.
Yeah.
It's a theoretical improvement based on an expectation. That expectation can be dashed by a billion things that happen on a daily basis, Walter.
Yeah, so the macro issues are a concern, the sectoral valuation concerns. If we have a bit of a tech washout or a China washout, that could be a concern. But if it goes well, hopefully this entity will be seen in the same way that SoftBank is seen, which is an Asian giant that does lots of internet and tech investing. So if it does, then it gets its own cachet, it gets its own visibility, there's a bit of hype and fun around it, it trades at a premium because it's seen to have smart guys at the helm. So I think it could work. I think we just have to be patient and let it run and roll. And we'll see in the fullness of time.
We are at the JSE. I'm with Govender and Paul Theron. We are chewing the fat on the first quarter of 2019. The first 3 months of the year of 2019 have gone by in a flash. One of the most significant transactions announced over the last 3 months has been this week's announcement by Naspers of this new listing happening on the Amsterdam Stock Exchange, the Euronext exchange. Now, there was, about 18 months ago, another South African company that thought an international listing would be a good idea. It's been in the news fairly recently because of the massive fraud exposed in the 14-month investigation that PwC has done into the collapse of Steinhoff. Pick up on that point in a moment.